All right, here we are. Welcome,
Hey,
David.
hey, how's it going?
Awesome. Let me verify everything's going on the internet land.
Audio's
Oh,
working, everything's
yeah.
fine.
Yeah, it seems to be. Yep,
Awesome.
I hear it over there. Wonderful. Well, this is
Cool.
amazing. I always love it when I say, "Hey, David, do you want to show off some crazy stuff?" and you say yes. So,
Uh,
and so we've got like new .NET 5 stuff. We've got linker and a
yep.
bunch of just crazy stuff, right?
Random features, new APIs, and then I guess I got a couple of questions from the internet, so I'll try to answer some of those as well.
Awesome. Cool. Send your chats or send your questions over. So we're actually doing today as an experiment. We're actually on Periscope, which I didn't even know that was still a thing, but we're on Periscope. We're on Twitter, or we're on Twitch, and we're on YouTube. And all the questions from YouTube and Twitch come in, and we can actually highlight them on the screen, which is really cool. So, so like for instance, boom, look at that. So great.
Oh, wow.
Let me jump right in with the community links, and I will just share the entire screen. Why not? Wonderful. Okay, here we go with some wonderful community links. Every week I'm like, I don't know if we have that many this week, and then there's a ton of great stuff, and I end up cutting things down for time. But so here they are. We'll share them all out during the in the show notes and stuff at the end. I've got them at the bottom of the page there. And so great, let's jump right in. First of all, I was very excited to see this come in. I just saw this morning. I've actually been wanting to do this for a while. So browser automation, headless browser automation is really cool. You can do so much stuff with it. And to be able to do this from within functions is awesome. So like an obvious thing that you can do is automate testing. You can test your applications, test to make sure everything's working right. But you can also use it for some cool stuff like I was even looking at there are some things that we use that don't have a proper API, but I could kind of make an API by clicking around on the page. And so anyhow, this is neat. Puppeteer is really cool. That's one I've been looking at lately. There's just Anthony Chu writing about support for using that within Azure Functions. So here's an example. Creating something that is that is automating, and then deploying out to Azure Functions. And then he sets this up using the Linux consumption function app, and just publishes it out. So I'm actually hoping to get a look at that later this week, and use it to automate some stuff. Wow, we just got a raid on Twitch from Jeff Fritz. Crazy. This is a wonderful day in Twitch land. We're up to 160, 170, I don't know, thousands of people are watching. Welcome. We're on the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. We are going through the community link section right now, and then we're going to jump into, we have a huge treat today. David Fowler is going to be showing us new ASP.NET stuff for .NET 5. So welcome all you Twitch people. Okay, Mukesh just released this latest update. So this is the Web API Clean Architecture. And what I like about this is I like these that people are just creating these opinionated project types. So it's definitely a lot easier to create a project type that integrates in with Visual Studio now and with like .NET New. And so people are creating these. And so this is talking about the release. There's actually a full kind of page describing what it is and why. So APIs are definitely something where there are a lot of different opinions, and this is an opinion on ASP.NET Core APIs. And he talks about some of the different things that that he's trying to solve here. Features like onion architecture, CQRS with mediator, etc. So this is a great, just kind of cool example, both for learning, and then also if it ends up working exactly how you want to work. This seems like a pretty cool way to get a quick start on an API. All right, Jeremy Lickness just published this. This is updated docs, and this is ASP.NET Core Blazor server with any framework core. So guidance on working with any framework from Blazor server. And that is a really cool thing that we don't necessarily think about, is that Blazor server actually has support for it's actually running on the server and can do some pretty cool stuff where it's actually interacting directly with any framework. And then it's got the SignalR connection kind of proxying stuff back and forth. So anyhow, this is the official guidance in the docs. A couple of more Blazor things. Blazor Mr. Magoo publishing on. So this was something where he wanted to handle media events, specifically some HTML5 video events. And there are some that are not set up for bubbling yet. There are just some events that are not, he calls these out, ones that there's specific things that just need to get wired up. So he talks about, hey, by the way, there's these Blazor sprints, which are really cool. And if, that seems like an area where somebody could jump in on in the future. But he actually, it's not super hard to just hook up an event. And so at the end of it, it comes down to just a few lines of code to allow for bubbling up this play event for an HTML5 video. So, and then he's got that integrated into his Blazor components as well. I saw this come in from Bjorn, and this is just talking about the document viewer. So there's a signature tutorial sample, and this is pretty cool. I just like to highlight this, that people create these, that there is a component kind of marketplace coming up for Blazor. And this is pretty neat. If you want to implement digital signatures in an application, pretty cool to be able to do that. And, he's got a demo here, and you can go in and I could try and sign a document. So that's pretty neat, So anyhow, that's a new release. Congrats to them on that. That is neat stuff. Okay, so this is a cool one from Mark, and he's just writing about an ASP.NET Core URL builder. So he creates a fluent, immutable builder pattern to create API or URLs for his API. So he just kind of walks through doing that. He creates a class. He creates these kind of with action and with values, and his end result then is this fluent pattern where you just kind of create them out like that. So it's a nice kind of simple little builder there. While we're talking about builders, here's Khalid Abu Hakma. I want to just call out Khalid has been doing a ton of stuff lately. Some really cool, constant. He's been putting a lot of great content out lately. So here he's talking about building HTML in C# and talking about the HTML content builder. You don't want to concatenate strings. There's all kind of problems with that, and it's much better to use a builder pattern and use the supported builders that are included. So he talks about using the HTML content builder and handling writing out and that kind of stuff. So excellent. Okay, and the last one I wanted to share out, Matthew Jones. This is a fun sample that he walked through, and it's funny here. He called back out to Khalid. I'd actually pulled both of these links in and didn't even realize they were interlinking recently. But so Khalid had recently talked about conditional link clauses, and Matthew writes up a cool example using a conditional search. So the idea here is a board game search example where you could say, I would like to search for different board games, and if I'm searching for a number of players, then allow me to input what the number of players is. And if I'm searching for other kinds of stuff, then go in and put in additional search features. So, like play type, minimum age, that kind of thing. So, here's the backing classes for it. Here's the data that he uses, so pretty simple, just, not even backed by a big database. It's just a simple list of it's just some data. On the front end, he goes through and binds to the properties. I think it's actually easier to see if I skip down to the end and we see this. So the idea here is if you say, I would like to search by number of players, then we show the drop down for number of players. If we want to search by playtime, then we have a drop down for playtime. And what's cool with this is the search itself is super simple. So, it's just saying if search by this, then add in this, link query. And so this entire kind of what seems like it would be a complex search is very simple. So, and that is all of my links. Again, I'll share these out here. Those are being shared on the stream. And I'm going to remove myself. I will add you back in, David. So welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good.
Those are cool links.
Yeah. It's always fun for me to see all the different things the community is doing. They're just constant, like experimenting and coming out with new open source libraries. And some are just like, here's a problem I had and here's how I solved it, So
cool.
Good stuff. So what do you got for us?
Well, my shirt says the baddest software developer in the galaxy, which is not true.
It's true. Wait. Now here, you're full screen now. Let's see it.
Okay. There you go.
There you go. Wonderful.
And I'm in my kids' playroom / office.
So if you just want to like play with something for a bit, you can go and grab a toy. That sounds cool. Yeah, I mean, we're all coping during these times, right? We're all like, I've got 3 kids and they just started school this week and they're like on the Zoom grind, So,
all right, so let's start with the thing that's been on my mind, I guess, most recently in the last couple of weeks. There is a feature that's been in the box since .NET 3.0 called the linker. The linker is actually not new tech at all. Let me pull up where it came from. There's this repository called the model linker. If I pull up, let me drag this area up here. Mono linker, super old tech, was there since Mono was, I guess, in the beginning of Mono, and it's been in the .NET SDK since 3.0 in preview mode, mostly because the framework itself hasn't been properly annotated to be safe for linking. And there's different kinds of linking. There's, and by the way, linking, what it is the process of trying to shrink, remove unused bits from the assembly with the intent of shrinking the size. So for Xamarin apps, for Android, for iOS, that matters a lot. So this tech kind of came from that space. And
it's a hard problem too, right? Because like naively you could think like, oh, I can just like look at the dependencies and stuff, but then like actually trimming down what's used, a lot of stuff is kind of dynamic, like it's with dependency injection and all kinds of stuff.
Right. So the issue with the .NET in particular is reflection, or rather features where you don't have a static link between the caller and callee. The way I think about it conceptually is, you see this super awesome feature in VS, Code Lens.
Yeah.
If I look at this thing, is that zoom? Oh, Windows Plus not working.
There it is. Delayed zoom.
You can see this references 0.
Yeah.
Wherever there's a 0, there's a conceptual idea that I can remove this because it isn't used by my class statically, right? Now main happens to be special, and main is understood by the runtime. So you don't want to remove main because this actually is used, right?
Yeah.
So let's start there. So here's my application, brand new application, console app 2. I'm going to open the CS Barrage. It's a plain old CS Barrage targeting .NET 5. This is the new TFM, by the way, for .NET 5. There's no more core. It's just .NET 5. Beautiful, small, succinct. If I pull up my command line, I can see it. I can run this command. Let me add some goop here first. So I guess the question is, why link in the first place? I could run publish self-contained. And self-contained deployments let you deploy the entire framework and the application into one self-contained folder.
Yeah.
So I can run publish.
So it's a folder, but it's not a single binary.
Right. And I can pass in what's called a runtime identifier, or for short is RID. and that tells me what I want to publish for. So I can publish for Linux. I can publish for any OS that we support from any OS. So it's called cross-publish, I guess. So I can open up this folder.
Which I actually had somebody ask me about this recently. They couldn't believe that they could build on Mac for Windows, or you can build on Windows for Linux or whatever. Like, it's pretty crazy. You just need the SDK installed, and you just do that -R.
Yeah,
in the red.
It works mostly because we're copying files around. We aren't like actually doing any native compilation yet. So here is a self-contained application. It's rather messy. There's all of these files just in directory flat, right? And you can see for some reason I've used all these things in my Hello World. So Hello World by default has like all this stuff, right?
Wow. That's beautiful.
So the impression is that we're bloated and heavy because you're seeing things like megabyte large XML. See how big XML is? XML is huge.
Yeah.
9 megs for correlate, blah, 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 blah. So this is fine. This is nice. If I were to look at the size of the folder, it would be 70 megs, 65 megs on disk for Hello World, right?
Wow.
So the question really is is that really the best you can do? And the answer is no. So in .NET 5, you can do publish trimmed. Probably the first thing we've added IntelliSense for NMS build property since the beginning of time. There it is, publish trim true. Then I can open the console and run that again. And it should be smaller. So this should run I think this should do assembly-based linking, which basically removes things that weren't used at all.
Okay.
So there's different levels. There's assembly, and there's type, and there's member. And at every level, you get more aggressive. So first is, have I used this assembly at all? If I have used it, keep it. Second is keep the assembly, but trim types. If I've used a type, keep the whole type. And then crazy mode is keep the type but remove members.
Okay. Right. And each of those seems more complicated, right? It's very easy. Well, it's kind of easy to say, did I ever load this assembly at all? You can track for assembly loading. But then as you get down to the point of members and you're like, well, this member depends on this, but only if it's called this way. And
exactly. And that's where it gets more iffy as well. You see this yellow, the sea of warnings, telling me what things might break because it's not sure. Ignore it all. It doesn't matter.
Okay. YOLO.
But yeah, if I do a quick size check, I should be down a bit more now. 20 megs, right? So that's a good chunk laid off.
So wait, where did we go from and into?
So
how much?
So we had 65 megs before, and now we're at 24 megs.
That is quite good.
Right. So I still have a bunch of assemblies that have been used in some form or the other. And I think one thing to recognize is that even though you may not be using it directly, something in your closure may have been pulling it in. So for example, the runtime uses the stat trace assembly to read your stat trace when you have an exception. So you'll see a bunch of dependencies in here that you haven't used yourself, but maybe used by the runtime itself. And then this code, the core CLR itself is native, which doesn't get linked today. So you end up with a bunch of these native clumps in the bin folder because they can't be reduced any further.
So how do you, as you're working on this, how do you get insight into what exactly, if you're what was calling this specific member or what was calling, is there diagnostic information you can get to?
Yeah, so these warnings are trying to tell you, hey, these potential call sites are broken because they haven't been marked. And in .NET 5, we added a feature to the linker to help detect. If you go to docs and you pull up one of the design docs that speaks about reflection flow.
Mm-hmm.
The big challenge in .NET is that, like I said before, things that are not statically referenced in the code are hard to determine if you should keep or not, right? So you have to anchor via some kind of hint to say, like, I want to keep this assembly keep this type in the assembly, or keep this member in the assembly. And you want to do it in a way that doesn't make you replicate attributes everywhere, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So there's kind of a trade-off between the linker being smart and the linker being told too much stuff. So let me show an example of where the linker can break, right? So let me turn on crazy mode. So I'm going to add this snippet. So by default, what happens is the linker is always conservative, and it only trims assemblies. And if you turn this on, it does assemblies as well. If I do trim mode, link, this turns on member level trimming. So I want to trim both types and members. And then, since I love MS Build, as we all know, I added some MS Build group here to run before link and mark every assembly in the graph as aggressive linking. So this basically will break everything, right? It'll trim my app, it'll trim the framework, it'll trim everything in my dependency graph.
Mm-hmm.
And let's output the warning to a text file.
Is this structured? Can you get like structured output on this? You know what I mean? This logging, is there, because it's just a bunch of text, right?
Yeah. So my guess is by the time we make this a feature in the IDE,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be printed to the error list like normal.
Okay.
And you can go to links in your source code to tell you what's broken.
Okay.
Yeah. At least for the things that are in your source code, it'll warn you. The fun thing about the linker walks the entire dependency graph. So it's walking all the assemblies, even in the framework, and it warns you about things that you can't change.
Okay.
And I think that the idea is that you file bugs on either the framework or libraries to fix their stuff to be linker friendly.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a tag, a label on GitHub called linker friendliness, where we kind of go through and attack every assembly.
Got it. So those are hints. Yeah. So by the way, as we're going into this, there's some people people are loving this. There's also some questions about like, what exactly is this doing and how does it compare? So like one comment here that came up was like, this is a kind of newer thing for .NET Core versus .NET Framework. With .NET Framework, you just always had the whole thing there, right?
Yep.
Whereas this gives you the opportunity to trim things down.
Yeah. I think with the advent of self-contained applications and single file, this becomes more of a thing. Before, if you had the actual framework installed on the target machine, that'd be installed globally, and you would copy your single binary, so it's actually smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could depend on a shared global installation. But now, if you want to carry the entire thing with you, the question is, do you need to carry the entire thing every time? And with new workflows like Blazor and Xamarin being merged into .NET 5 into a single platform, we kind of have to have this feature in the base. And that's helping it become more general purpose for more scenarios. So
like the example, like iOS, you've got to precompile everything anyhow, right? I mean, it's got, and like some of these, and then like you're saying with Blazor, you're trimming like the tiny file size is super important
for the browser, exactly. Yeah. So yep.
Yeah. Okay. A question here is like this one: if you remove members, what if you have methods that call each other but neither is called from somewhere else? Is it able to see that and like remove?
Yeah, so it walks the entire closure, and it basically builds up this knowledge that says, if A calls B and B calls C or C calls D, but if nothing is called at all, it'll remove the whole thing. So it's pretty smart about how it removes features or removes things. And there are bugs. So the reason this isn't on by default, and I had to add this MS Build group, is because, this isn't going to be in your default project. This is like me hacking away, trying to figure out how to make the entire stack linkable. It's gonna take a change in the ecosystem and in the runtime itself to make the whole thing work.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at the warnings just to see what kind of things show up, right? Like These, by the way, are coming from the BCL itself. So the BCL itself isn't fully clean, right? It needs to be marked and scrubbed with more attributes. Get type handle, it says, I can't figure out the type passed into make generic type, right? So there are a bunch of warnings like that, and we'll talk about what they are and how to get rid of them in some cases. So by default, I have a bunch of warnings. I'm going to ignore this for now because I'm going to assume my app is perfect and has no bugs. If you look at this app, it just has a simple hello world, right? If I add a class, and I don't use that class, right? My class is just there defined but not used. If I built this normally and I look in ISLESpy, it would show me that class, right? So let's do that. Let's look at ISLESpy and look at the assembly I got built.
ISLESpy is just awesome too. If people don't know about it, I mean, it's been around forever, and they keep adding cool features in. There's like some really cool like code searching stuff, and
I know, right? Who doesn't have ISLESpy installed? You should have it installed. I have it pinned to my taskbar. Whoa, is this taking super long to compile?
There's a thing they added in. I guess it was like a year or so ago now, but it's like a regular expression search, so you can like do some pretty complex like searching in decompiled code.
Oh, sorry. Someone said explain the BCL. The BCL is the base class libraries, the .NET framework itself. Why is this taking forever to build?
There's also some love out there for DNSpy. People like DNSpy.
Oh, DNSpy. Oops. Did I like stomp on the wrong, they bet on the wrong horse? Oh, no. Okay, use your favorite, your best decompiler that you use.
There you go.
No.
Cool.
Okay, this is like, let me see if something else is running. Best part is PowerShell core is running as a .NET tool on my machine. So when I PS, if I PS kill, it'll kill the terminal. It's not, which is not what I wanted. Okay, so it compiled after like an hour. If I look at the assembly, delete this.
Okay, so you've written that code in Visual Studio, and then you're opening that assembly. You're decompiling it in ISLESpy.
Looking at in ISLESpy, the newest version. My class is there. It's not used, but it's still there, right? So the assumption is it's pretty conservative. It doesn't remove things aggressively. There's no hard that says remove unused things. It just keeps all the IL in the assembly. Okay. Now let's try using the linker through it with aggressive trimming turned on. So I've run the linker. I've run a publish, and I'm gonna preemptively look for that folder. Win64 publish, and it should be this DLL. And I will. Oh, my computer's on fire. So it should publish, and it should.
Well, so while you're doing that, there's some discussion there in here about things like reflection and giving hints. So, and I know you're walking through some of this stuff, but like, are the hints things like attributes, or, you know, like how specifically are you hinting to the compiler what is
Great question. So there's some patterns that do and don't work by default. So if you look at this document, it kind of outlines some of the features that the linker can figure out without you telling it. So for example, if you have a constant type of definition, like type of blah, with the blah directly defined in code, the linker can actually track that and follow it through the calls like this. So it knows that it has to keep constructors for both of these types, just in case anyone is true or false, right?
Right.
So it walks both branches. It says, okay, I see this is a condition, but it has type of being assigned to two different things. And it sees the actual type name defined in like IL. So it doesn't have to figure out a dynamic type name. It sees this call as it knows it has to keep these constructors and a method called foo and a field called bar. Okay. So if you give it these kind of expressions, it can figure out without you having to tell it what things to keep.
Okay.
This is simple, right? But if you do crazier stuff, you end up having to mark the members, either type members or generic T's in your source code with this new attribute called dynamically access members.
Okay.
So
can you zoom that up a bit?
Yeah.
It's a... Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for example, I have this type property here, and the question is, how does the linker figure out what type this refers to so it doesn't get removed, right? Now this is easy because I have a constant string here, so it'll keep foo assembly and the foo type in foo assembly. And
right.
This tells it to track those types and to look for every read or write. And if you can't resolve at statically what this type is, then complain.
Okay.
And it only works because this is a constant string. If this came from a database, it would go like, you are probably going to break because the type in the database is not one that we're going to keep. So go away.
Okay. Wow.
Your compilation finished after an hour. And if I open up this file, it should show that thing is gone. Right? Program is there, thing is gone.
Yep.
So it saw that thing wasn't used and unguarded it. Right?
Wow. Okay.
Super simple. Now, if I did this, it would keep this thing around because I used it in code, right? But awful names, foo and bar. Type of, if I did c.getType, get method, I think this won't work. This says get the type of my class, get the method to call foo, and invoke it dynamically on C. Right. So in theory, this should work. If the linker is smart enough, it should figure out what the type is and do the needful, make it work, right?
Yeah.
In a broken scenario, this should break. So it should say I couldn't find method foo, and it will give me a null ref. Because if the linker removed foo because it couldn't see it, then this call would fail, return null, and this should null ref, right?
Okay.
And when you do stuff like this, there's another attribute you can do if you can't tell the linker what type is being used. If it can't figure it out, you can either change your code to be a friendly pattern for the linker, or you can use this feature called, get rid of this thing, called dynamic dependency.
Can you explain in your code there's a question on the invoke method, and you've got the object 0. What does that mean?
Okay, so when you invoke a method via reflection, you get what's called a method info. This is a method info, and that has a call to invoke. And it takes 2 arguments. One is the instance you want to invoke the thing on, and one is the argument. So if foo had an argument that was an integer x, I pass in the value of that integer here, right? So I'm invoking this method called foo, passing in the instance. So I'm invoking it on this class, and passing in these arguments. So before it took no arguments. So it was 0. I'm invoking on the class C, right?
Okay.
Since it isn't static. If it was static, then I could pass in null for the instance.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, and there I saw a question about the linker being more interactive.
Yeah.
We are looking at an analyzer to do it to give you more hints at compile time, so you don't have to run the linker for an hour every time you want to make a change. So this attribute tells the linker that I'm using reflection in this method. So if you keep this method, keep all the things I depend on dynamically, right?
Okay.
So I could say like keep type of my class type there. And there's like weird syntax for picking overloads and stuff.
While you're talking about that, there's also a question. Can you give it more aggressive hints? Can you say you're not sure, but I can tell you I'm never using this method, or that kind of stuff?
I don't think you can be aggressive in how you want to remove things. I think linker, if you turn on aggressive mode, think of it as being aggressive, and you have to tell it what to keep in case you are not careful, right?
Okay.
So I think the way you do it is you turn on member level trimming, and then use that to say, okay, everything is going to get erased, and then from there you try to preserve more things in your code via these attributes. So for example, so this is the way you keep things that are dynamic on a method.
Mm-hmm.
The other crazy one is the generics. So I have this, and T is used in some way. Like if I say where T new, say T must have a constructor.
Mm-hmm.
The linker will look at this and it will know. So let's create a class bar. The linker will know that it has to keep bar's constructor, because I said the constraint here is T is new, which requires a new constructor.
So it's understanding. It's required to have a constructor.
Yeah, it grabs constraints, because if the linker sees me referencing bar but never sees me instantiate bar, it'll erase bar's constructors completely. So if no one is calling new, it gets erased. And the cool part about that is that when you use it with DI, what it does is it'll see the types, so it'll preserve all the actual classes and implementations, because you call things like add singleton, add transient, add whatever, passing in the interface and implementation.
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll keep everything, and then it'll delete all the constructors, so you can't create anything. So it's not super useful.
Right.
So in ASP.NET Core 5.0, ASP.NET Core 5, not ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core, it did not get renamed. Where's my telephone? What happened here? No.
Yeah, so .NET 5 with ASP.NET Core.
That's right, and EF Core. Is that confusing?
We need a decoder ring.
This app is like on fire. This app has a sample of the linker running with ASP.NET Core. I'll run it in the background just to see if I can get it running, so I can show a demo of it actually working. This is temporary until we get all the bits together to like on fire bits. So don't judge me.
That's part of the joy of the community stand-up. It's laptop demos. It's maybe working.
How much time do we have left?
At least 20 minutes. So we go to the hour.
I'm gonna jump to a bunch of random features and just after this linking stuff is done. So this should be fine. So in ASP.NET Core, we have to do a bunch of things to make it linkable. I don't know if I could show them in here, but I could show them in the non-broken project. So for example, when you do things like use routing, or you do app.use middleware, you pass in a type like my middleware, right?
Yeah.
And this doesn't work because it'll see the type, like I said before, and it will keep the type around, but it will delete the methods and it will delete the constructor because it can't see them being created. Because via DI, we activate your thing, and we call invoke via reflection. So we had to mark middleware, use middleware, with this attribute that says we're going to access the members of the middleware class constructors, and we're going to access the methods.
Okay.
So if you have a public method or a public constructor, we're going to keep those on the type. So linker, please don't delete things. Trust us. All right.
So that's okay. So that's done at the kind of DI level there.
Yeah. So on the method itself, everything calling use middleware now for free will preserve the middleware whenever you call it.
Okay.
Yep.
Nice. One question, and I'm trying to throttle back the questions a bit because we want to let you get to stuff. But oops, I did the wrong one. This was a question on removing the constructors. Is that worthwhile? Like, is there enough code and impact there in the constructors to?
Funny question. So I asked the same question because I was like, why would you keep the type and remove constructors? So it turns out the linker has this mode where it can hollow out all the bodies of all the methods to make it like be throw null, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually delete constructors and delete all the implementations of all the methods.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be huge.
Okay.
So let's see. So that is linking. I'm going to jump like a crazy person now to my project that I spent last night working on. All right. So I have a bunch of regions here with a bunch of code and features in .NET 5 that are kind of a mix between ASP.NET Core and .NET Core itself. If I miss something, we'll get to it later at some point, maybe, possibly. So the first thing is I got asked to do a Bedrock update. So let me show some code. We added there's a Bedrock, super small history. Kestrel has a bunch of abstractions for transports, mostly on the server side. We saw a need for doing this on server and client, so Bedrock became a thing. We added a bunch of abstractions in .NET Core 3.0, and then in 5, those have moved into the BCL. So now we have these client and server abstractions for streaming connections, where you can basically plug in an arbitrary transport into anything that understands any client and server that understands the abstractions to make it work together. So for example, I have an Echo server. Here's my Echo server. It takes in this thing called a connection listener factory. I'm sorry it's that long. That's just how it came out in the review. You call listen async, you pass in an endpoint and some properties and a token in case you want to cancel it. You get back a listener. The listener itself has properties, an endpoint, and you call accept. So think of this like your socket, your listening socket. Mm-hmm. You get listener, you call accept in a loop, and you can have an Echo server. My server is bad. It only handles one client at a time, just because I want to be lazy.
Okay.
Connection itself is the main abstraction. It has a pipe and a stream. Pipelines is now part of the framework. It's actually in the core now. And there's some helpers on here to create stuff from a stream or a pipe. The base just has a bunch of properties for local endpoint, remote endpoint, and other properties. It has a method called close, where you can say you want to shut down gracefully or not. So if you're familiar with what we had before in ASP.NET Core, this is the same kind of API shape, but it's now in the BCL. So it's in a namespace called System Net Connections. Mm-hmm. Woo! I'm so happy.
Nice. It's graduated.
Yeah.
So what all is built on top of that then?
So we'll show a sample with HTTP client in a split second. So I wrote an in-memory transport just for fun. So it basically lets me bind a client and server in memory. So I wrote all the abstractions. This is all just goop to show you that I can actually plug in abstractions. I'm running a client and a server, passing in the abstractions. So this code has no idea what the actual transport is. It's just doing an Echo server, right?
Okay.
If I run this, it should run before the end of time. What is going on? Oh, oops. I know what that is. I know what this is. That's
so while it's Can I ask a question? Is now an okay time to ask a question?
Yep, go ahead.
So this was interesting, just going back a bit to the linker question.
Yep.
Is there a way to like have some sort of analyzer and actually get some interactive stuff on your linking there? Like pointing out.
There isn't one yet. When this becomes more mainstream as part of like .NET 6, I imagine it'll be, we'll have more tools. I think right now in the short term, what you're seeing is we are still in the mode of this is for Blazor only, Blazor and Xamarin. When it becomes more mainstream, we'll have to figure out how to make tooling better. But there is a big focus on making the tooling experience good, because this thing is so easily, it can break your app so easily that it kind of requires like compile time assistance.
Makes sense.
Okay. So here's my server. Super lame. You can't tell what it's doing. But what it's doing is the hardest hello world on the planet. The client connects, you get a factory, you call connect async on the endpoint, you get a connection back. This is not a well-known API. You can open the STD in as a stream and copy it to the connection. So this is basically doing copy from the input to the network and then copy from the network to the output. So I can see this is an echo server basically. And then I wait for all to finish.
So that is streaming from the input and echoing to the output.
Yep. And that was all in memory transport.
So okay, so that's a memory transport built on top of the system net connections, and then you can do and then the idea is that other stuff then moves to run on top of that as well.
Right. So here's the useful part of it. So here is HTTP client in .NET 5. So the implementation of HTTP client in .NET Core is the sockets HTTP handler, and this is the raw implementation over like raw sockets and streams. It now has a new property called connection factory, and this lets you specify what transport should be used for HTTP. So now I could talk HTTP to any transport on the box, on the machine, or anywhere else. So I can pass in my in-memory transport as so I can run a HTTP server, a mini HTTP server in memory right here. So here's my server. It's getting a connection. It's assuming the entire request fits in a single buffer. Who cares? This is a demo. And it prints out a hard-coded response, right? HTTP 100, content length blah, hello world, right?
Yeah.
By the way, this is a new API. Super sneaky. You can actually now write a span of chars to an iBuffer writer of byte. Super not important, but I put it in here just because I'm happy we added the API. So I can encode bytes directly into my pipe.
Okay.
All right. So, and now I can make a request via HTTP client like normal, get async, passing in my base URL, and it should hit my fake server. So this is normal HTTP client built into the framework, supporting different transports. And wait, hold on. Did I comment this out? Maybe not. Nope.
So there was a question going back to the linker again. Somebody was asking how exactly to leave, feedback or whatever. And Elon said he thought this was the place, but wanted you to confirm. Is that the right repo to leave issues and stuff? GitHub mono linker.
Yeah, for linker issues itself, for the BCL, if you find bugs where things get broken for linking, I start with .NET runtime, and then have things move to, if they're pure linker bugs that you found, then yeah, linker is fine.
Okay, cool.
Yep. So this should work. So here's a console. There's a request and there's a response. This is the server printing out the request that came from HTTP client, and the client printing the response that came from the response. This is going to be used in a bunch of places. So gRPC wants to support name pipe transports. That'll be enabled through the same factory mechanism. The Docker team wants to talk to the Docker daemon on the machine via HTTP, so they can now use HTTP client to do that. Before, Docker had to write their own HTTP client to make sure that worked. So now this is like
they can build on top of.
Yeah, exactly. The goal being that you can reuse the actual transport, the actual protocols in the box, and then just change the transport under the covers.
Okay.
So we're in the process of adding Bedrock to the new abstractions to Kestrel. That's happening super late in the milestone. We are ninjas, so hopefully we'll get it in.
And for people that don't know, Kestrel is HTTP server.
HTTP server, yeah. So we have the client pieces done already. We're working on the server pieces soon. That should be in pretty quickly. All right, so this I didn't want to show, but I should show it anyway, just because it's new.
Yes, you should.
We added synchronous HTTP client methods.
All right.
Synchronous blocking HTTP client methods to block on your IO that you should never ever use. But if you have to use it, use these ones now.
Well, it's hard because there are some cases where it is. I mean, like you shouldn't use them for performance and all those things, but then sometimes it's like you need a complete response, or you need
right. So it's better. So we didn't add every overload. We didn't add like get, async, the string, etc. We only added send. Made it hard to use on purpose.
Yep.
So if you have to implement synchronous HTTP client calls for bad reasons, then you can use the new methods, and it will try to reduce the number of threads. It tries really hard to not spin up more than one thread. So that should be better performance than doing get result, because it isn't that implementation.
So if you have to do synchronous, it's better to at least have something with the guardrails on that'll point you at.
Yes.
Yeah.
So feel bad for using it, but use it if you must.
You should write to the console. You should feel bad.
So JSON is interesting. We added a bunch of things to JSON that hopefully make people happier when trying to migrate from JSON.NET. No shade, James. It's a great framework. It's a great platform. Love your stuff. So the first feature is immutable types. There were complaints before that we didn't support immutable types in the JSON serializer. So here's a record C#9 feature where I defined a person that has a name and an age. Very simple. And then the code calls deserialize, passing in my age and my name, and I can deserialize into a tuple. By the way, records let you deconstruct into variables, so I can actually deconstruct the person into a name age tuple. Super nice. I can print that. This should work now. The second sample is person 2, which is a class that has 2 constructors, and this becomes ambiguous. So you tell it what to use. You tell it which one to pick by using this new attribute called JSON constructor. And this says, I prefer this one for JSON. All right. Okay. So you can put your types with this attribute to make it work. And that should work just fine. You can now deserialize fields. That was a request. That was common. So a student does not have properties. It has public fields. Public fields. Who does this? Anyway, if you do, I won't judge you, but I will. So GPA and name, good student, and you have to pass in a bool called include fields to turn it on, and it'll work just fine. It'll get the GPA and age and put it into the fields. We added this new, so when you are doing web stuff, talking to JavaScript clients, there are options that we kind of turn on that we want to default. Like you want to camel case property names and be sensitive. So we have this new enum called JSON defaults, and we have 2 values. General.
Web and
web.
not.
Web.
Unweb. That's cool. So it just selects like intelligent defaults for webby stuff.
Yep. And then one of the most common asks was for reference loop handling, because people love to serialize their EF models directly on the wire. I won't judge you. I promise I won't judge you, but I will. and those normally have cycles. So here's two employees. I guess the employees have reports and a manager. So your typical like cycle, right? You'll hit. So Jane's reports is John, and John's manager is Jane, and now things are screwed. Or not. You can now pass in this option, reference handler.preserve, and it will preserve references in cycles, and it will deserialize that object graph, and it will just work.
Okay.
So that's like a bunch of things.
So a lot of what that helps with. So we had this kind of thing over time where we had JSON.NET, and then there's the system JSON types now, but there were a decent amount of times up through like 3.1 where you still would hit an edge case and you'd have to drop back to using JSON.NET. So this is kind of removing a lot of those most common.
Yeah. So the whole thing that we hit the top. I think we had a list. It was like the top 10 pain points in trying to move over from JSON.NET to system text JSON.
Nice.
So we should if that isn't the case, please give us feedback like as soon as possible. We think we've hit all the hard pain points. There's still a few left over.
Yep.
Like for example, if you were to deserialize numbers and quotes, that didn't work before, and that was super annoying. But now it works just fine. A lot of small things that kind of would kill you over time.
Yeah.
So we also added this feature, which is we added HTTP client methods to get from JSON directly. So there's no get from JSON async directly on HTTP client built into the framework. So you can just call get JSON async, passing in a URL, and it will do the right things for you.
I had a question here. Does system.text.json support reference types yet, or are there plans for
reference types? What?
I don't know. I just read the questions.
Is that the right question? Like, did you mean value types? Maybe it does support reference types. Maybe it means something more specific.
Yeah.
Someone asked about time span. I think time span also works. No, don't quote me on that. I gotta check.
Time in JSON is difficult.
Horrific.
Yeah.
Like JSON get JSON ref. Oh, okay. No. I'm gonna keep going. PEM support.
Yeah.
PEM support. PEM is a format that you can store certificates, keys, in. It is very common on non-Windows systems. Windows loves PFX files. PEM is a Linux native. Well, most of the things on Linux use PEM format. So we added support for PEM in the BCL, like all up. Before you had to use this library called Bounty Castle, which is a very powerful open source crypto library to decode PEM certificates and create them. But now we can actually read certs from PEM. You can import a full chain from a PEM. So I have a PEM file here. I have a Let's Encrypt certificate that has kind of the SSL cert and the intermediate cert in one file. And I can do things like import from PEM file, get the whole cert chain. I could import the private key from PEM file into the cert. I can do things like in one shot create the cert from a cert and a key. So normally PFX files have all these things in the same file format. But when you're using PEM, for the most part, people split out the keys and the certs into different files. So you'll see begin private key here is a key file, and you'll see begin certificate for the cert. And now we can create the .NET native objects for these PEM formats in one go.
Wow. People are liking this. This is also something, anytime I see something like security and certificate related, I don't want to write that code myself at all. You know, and definitely something, Bouncy Castle, like you're saying, is a well-respected one that's been around for a while. But I want something that like people that know security have reviewed. Yep.
Yeah, so there's one more feature. Like in Castro, we added support for PEM. So so in Castro, we call these APIs as well. So you can now specify in configuration a PEM cert and a PEM path without having to worry about all the stuff. So you can get your cert from your SSL cert person. They'll give you your cert and key, and you can just put it in here, and it will work like magic. So no more having to run OpenSSL, create cert, passing in 10 different files to create a PFX. It'll just like, we will support that format now natively. And also a change that was made in Kestrel is there's a new API to kind of pre-populate, figure out the cert chain up front. Before, what would happen is, as connections came in, they would all race to resolve the cert chain. And if you had certs that were not cached on the machine, it would make requests to the to wherever the intermediates were to download more certs and then cache them on disk. So we had a bunch of cases where people ended up having thread pool starvation because a ton of things would come in. They would all just make requests at the same time, and they would crash the whole server. So now Kestra will pre-populate the certs at startup time with this new API. And you can also pass in offline mode, so you can make it not go online to like actually request certs. So it'll fill instead.
Okay.
But it could be an option to basically say, if you want this to work, configure your server to have the entire cert chain before going online, right?
And those certs are cached over time on the server.
So one funny thing is, normally when you are using like Let's Encrypt, they give you the entire chain offline in a file. If you were to create a cert with that file, it would take the SSL cert and not the full chain, and would re-download the entire chain on the fly. So this API lets you say, give me the cert and give me the chain, and don't go online. Trust me, or offline faults, right? Don't go online. I have the full chain here. Check it to make sure it's good, and then keep it in this object model. So you never have to like make requests ever again, right?
Okay.
So yeah, that's a new thing in Castro. This API I don't have yet, but remember doing this garbage, having to enumerate all app-domain assemblies. I mean, don't do this. Enumerate all types, find plugins.
Yeah.
Well, this is backwards, right? We finally added this API, which I don't have on my machine, but we added type.is assignable to. Oh
wow.
This is backwards.
Yeah.
It's funny, when I first joined Microsoft like 12 years ago, I thought about it and it never got fixed, and we finally made it work. So happy.
Wow. Okay. So that makes things like plugin scanning much simpler, right?
Yeah. But this is not linker friendly, so I'll skip that for now.
Okay. Will it be? Can it be? That seems like if you're scanning for plugins.
Yeah. So the trade-off made was that. So here's the issue: if you trim aggressively and you delete code that the plugins may have needed, you're kind of screwed. So for example, if you delete string.substring,
yeah,
and like plugins come in dynamically and require it, it won't work, right?
Yeah.
So I think the current idea is that the linker could detect this pattern and could figure it out, but it chose not to. So you have to preserve things that you want to keep for your plugins if you want to make it friendly. But by default, I think this will fail. This pattern will fail the linker test because it basically says preserve everything, right?
Okay.
There is discussions to figure out how to do things like maybe have a help that's like assembly.get all types that derive from blah as a linker hint to say preserve all these types that may derive from this thing, but it won't preserve things that might be using. Okay. So that's an interesting trade-off.
So I think Christian's question is assignable too, but he says, does that go all the way up the base hierarchy?
Yeah, it does.
Cool.
So logging has a couple new features in 5 that are pretty fun. Let me see if this works. I can print out. So Ad Console has been there from the beginning. It is the console logger by default. By default, it had 3 formats that were kind of hard-coded. Systemd, what's the other one? Systemd and normal, I guess, like the default logger. We added a couple more formats and a new concept that lets you basically determine how you want to format the logs for a console. So if you want to, you can not have to write your own logger, but you can plug in how the logger formats the actual data on the screen. And we have JSON. We have this format called single line, so one line. Oh, look, it's running all the JSON. JSON is here. Let me comment out the JSON. I love regions. You didn't hear me say that.
No, this is great. I'm sure, I know everyone on the chat loves regions too. I actually made a T-shirt, but it didn't work right. But it said begin region, and then it had end region, and it had commented out end region. So just the regions would continue forever.
All right. So that second error, I don't know what that is. Let's ignore it for now. This is the default console logger. It logs to the console like this. This is the format. But in .NET Core, .NET 5, I keep saying .NET Core 5. Oh no. You can do add JSON console, and I can set properties like format the text indented because this is a demo, and then include scopes true. So this adds a JSON console format to the actual logger, and now I can change how the console logs to the output. Instead of being a boring piece of text, I can actually print out structured JSON. And
can you zoom in on that a bit?
Oh, yep.
It's so tiny.
And this is super useful if you want to have systems read the console output and scrape it and then put it into logging. So Elasticsearch or Elasticsearch or where we go, or Azure Log Analytics. And then we added this other feature. There's a feature in .NET 3.2.1 called activities, where you can basically track a unit of work. So you can say start stop times. We added a feature to logging that lets you attach activity IDs to every log going out.
Okay.
I can say activity tracking options, bunch of crap like parent ID, span ID, trace ID. I'm not sure why we didn't add an all, but there's reasons I'm sure that were pretty good because we're smart.
So that lets you then attach things to this activity, and then you can kind of track it through multiple things. That's part of the idea? That's
correct. So I can create an activity called my operation. I call start. So now I have, if I were to check activity.id, it have one, or current, I guess. Current has a format, it has ID, it has parent ID, it has a bunch of stuff on it. And it matches the W3C trace context open standard format that we kind of embraced.
Yeah.
I can create a logger, I can log information, and now this flag should attach all the activity properties to my logging, to my logs. So if I run again, I should see the activity ID attached to the information here. So
and that's really helpful for like a microservice application or something with multiple APIs.
Yep.
Nice.
So I can basically look for all logs that have this trace to find all logs for a request.
Okay.
Right. And you can nest them. So I can have parents and children, and I can have a tree of calls. And every log can track the correct parent. So I can find logs for individual requests or spans. Right. And a span is kind of like a single start-stop operation.
So a span is, you just said a single start-stop operation, and then you can have IDs that are within that span. So the span, okay.
So spans can have children.
Okay.
And when you nest spans, the parent becomes a previous span, and IDs get created all the way down that let you track the individual spans or the entire place.
Question: can an activity be in a using?
Yeah. So activity, the API is for saying it in nice terms. Not garbage. What's the word? Not as nice. So this API isn't so bad. You call start stop. This does not let people who want to handle the events or like visualize the start stops get at it. So before you had to write a bunch of code like diagnostic source dot write activity and have a bunch of code around that call. So we actually made it simpler in .NET 5. We integrated the Open Telemetry, which is an open standard. We integrated their APIs into the BCL. So ignore this part for now. This is the part trying to consume activities when they happen. But this is the code that you would write now. So you create an activity source, and you call start with the using.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a request. This is a child activity, and then they get disposed, right? And then same here. So here's the using var blah, right?
Okay.
So this is the new API in .NET 5 for making activities.
There's a question. Yeah, I was just sharing the link here, but is the W3C format standard now? Looks like it's a recommendation.
Oh, yeah, and we made it the default in .NET 5 as well. So if before you had to do something like activity dot default ID format W3C, this is now the default format.
Oh, that's nice, because I would always forget to do that.
Yeah.
Why isn't that working? Yeah. Because what else would you want it to be?
Exactly, right? Who would want something else? And then some super small things like value task has a bunch of methods that are to create results, which weren't there before. And then there's now a non-generic task completion source. Super nice. Before you have to do this, it's trash. Right? Object and then pattern null here. Oh, I can do this now. This new syntax.
Yeah, I was wondering if you're going to show that off. I don't know if my brain's ever going to get used to that. I don't know. It's like backwards, you know. I mean, it makes sense, and if it had been around there for a while, I may have. I don't know. It's just.
I think I'd use it for fields because fields can't do var.
Oh, right. There you go.
But not for this. This hurts my brain.
It's wonderful.
No. That was the things I had for that.
That is a lot of stuff.
We are probably out of time though.
we are, but you know, people are staying around. We still have almost 300. We have 300 people watching. If you have a bit more.
Okay, I have other random things then. So that was .NET Core. I have some ASP.NET Core stuff as well. Super not useful, but low level. By the way, I am using top level functions and statements everywhere because I love this feature. It's my favorite C#9 feature, I think. Wow. By far.
Someone commented on that.
They did? Do you love it too? If you don't, then
I don't know. It's another, you know.
This is so nice.
Yeah. And a lot of the time it's like, do I really need all the other stuff? No. You know.
We're going to change all the templates to piss everyone off. Kidding. Yeah. We won't do that.
There it is. Wait, I was scrolling through to find the thing to share. Just trust me, it's there.
So top level functions and statements, super nice, right? C#9. So this is a default application, ASP.NET Core application, and we had to add this feature for Bing because Bing uses our stuff.
Mm-hmm. Which is cool. We actually they've done like case studies and stuff because as they would update, they use things like it's the ahead of time compiling, but it's like I forget what it is.
QWERTY?
No.
Shoot. R2R.
Yeah, it's ready to run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they got huge performance benefits and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Bing is crazy. So Bing actually recently dropped cache in their deployment. And you can imagine getting traffic from Bing, what you would see like when you end up putting servers on the internet, what ends up happening is all kinds of garbage code, or garbage clients throw things like Castro now. So like Castro had a very strict policy of only supporting UTF-8 headers.
Yep.
And it turns out that does not fly when you are facing internet-facing traffic, right? You have to kind of accept a bunch of garbage and like make it not be bad, right? So we added this feature in .NET 5 that said for any header, any specific header, you can choose the encoding. But if you UTF-8, you may want Latin 1, you may want or anything else. Funny enough, Latin 1 lets you basically encode the bytes as strings. So you can actually store, it's kind of crazy. So arbitrary header, arbitrary headers, right? You could store as bytes within a string, and then once you're in your code again, like out of the server, you can decode it back to bytes.
Yeah,
cheaply.
That's just the internet. Kind of, we don't know how it works. Like, how does any of this stuff? Yeah, beautiful. And why is it called Latin? I don't know.
I don't know.
I always picture a bunch of monks, chanting. Oh man! Wow. Okay, so we've got that header stuff, and you said Bing's using that.
Yep. So other thing. So there were complaints about moving from web host to generic host. You couldn't do all the same things, and it was for good reasons, even though some of it was a bit restrictive. So to recap, the reason we moved from web host, which was this one, let me see, new or web host builder dot create. Wait, what? Web host. Can't type anymore. Create. Where are you? Where'd you go? Why'd it crash?
You have an exception.
Oh, I see. I have to resolve this type first. I can't do because it crashed. So let me type the whole thing painstakingly. Hosting. Oh, did you see it there? It was there. Web host. Yeah. Create default builder. Use startup. Before, you could do a couple of things. You could pass in a type pair, or I believe you could pass in, is that here too? This is new. You could pass in an instance by adding it to the container. So if you added an ISLESpy to the container, it would resolve that instance. But what ended up happening was that we had to have two containers, one to bootstrap the universe, and then one that was your app. So what could happen was you could have two sets of singletons that were kind of torn.
Yeah.
So you'd have two iloggers, two whatever you resolved in your startup constructor, you'd have two different versions of that in the application. So to solve it, we have generic host, which basically has one container, but it means that until you call configure services, you basically can't resolve anything useful until configure, right? In here, you can get configuration and the host context. So my host environment is available at this level, but what you can't do is you can't resolve like the logger until configure is called. And that was kind of annoying. Even worse was that you couldn't construct startup. We only had this overload, which made it really hard to pass state from your main app to startup class. So for example, if I did my own thing and I wanted to pass in like, I don't know, some object here, right? You would have, people would basically make it static. And they'd do horrible stuff like this. I know you're all on the call. I don't judge you. It's not your fault.
Yeah.
They do like horrible stuff like this, right? And set it on the instance and then like use it and configure. And you're mixing kind of static state and other state, and it's just gross, right? So now you can we give you a new overload for making your own startup class. And you can pass in like whatever you want here, right? Like new foo.
Yep.
Right. And we give you the context that gives you whatever is available to us at this time, which is configuration and hosting environment. So you can do whatever you want in here. If you want to create two containers, by all means do it. I think the main thing was that it was hidden before.
Mm-hmm.
And just injecting a service would basically create 2 islands. And
Yeah.
now,
So for cases like, say, for instance, you have startup args or something, right? You're able to like configure some things. Yeah.
Exactly. So now you can pass those in. So that is a change that was made kind of late.
Wow.
To ASP.NET Core.
Yeah, and so speaking of which, like we're getting toward, like it's late August, ships in November, so we're getting closer towards the end of like if it's hitting .NET 5, ASP.NET Core 5, it's kind of wrapping up at this point, right?
We are done. We are done. Like we are basically. So what we call there are two timelines. One is called tail mode.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in the preview 8 hasn't come out yet. RC1 is now being shut down. So we branched on Monday for RC1, which means now every check-in for RC1 has to go into a different branch, not master. Master is now RC2 RC2. And okay. I believe that the bar for RC2 is super high.
Yeah.
RC1, we're in tell mode. Tell mode is you tell someone the change you're making. And then once we get past this week is going to be ask mode. And ask mode is like where every change has to be emailed to like people to then approve or not approve. So someone's doing this type of change.
Okay. Because at this point you really like you've got to have a really good reason to get something in at this point.
Yeah. Yep. Someone said time. I didn't say Time Lord. Yeah, but there is a Time Lord, basically, who determines yes or no to your thing.
Question from Christian here. Any source generator love? Anything?
I had a thing that I was going to show, but I have no time.
Yeah, but we are kind of running pretty long. Okay.
Let me see. I am so there's nothing built into ASP.NET Core that uses them yet, but we do have a list of things to tackle in 6. From Razor to trying to remove reflection in ASP.NET Core in some cases, and a couple more ideas. DI is one of them that we want to look at. So there are a couple more ideas of where we think we can use them.
Yeah,
that will try out in 6.
What about what is schedule wise? When do you start seeing preview features show up for 6?
I think end of year maybe. Historically what we've done, we shut the stack shuts down in layers. So basically the BCL I believe is in ask mode already. The BCL mean the runtime itself. They shut down weeks before ASP.NET shuts down.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of staggered, right? And my guess is people will stop coding frantically maybe in a week or 2.
Yeah.
Well, some people, not. My goal is to get in a couple changes just before we go into ask mode.
Well, and it all kind of goes through this stack, right? So like you've got the framework BCL stuff, and then that rumbles through to like any kind of breaking things that it's going to hit, like ASP.NET, any framework, and then then there's the docs and the content and the demos and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like so.
Oh my god.
There's a lot of stuff.
Okay, yeah. So we have to. Okay, so we do have a bunch of work that is scheduled for like that isn't coding, like making sure the docs are filled out for a bunch of things. We actually have a big task to tackle to add docs for our APIs. I'll be frank, our API docs suck. They suck. Like, okay, just as an example, like, does anyone hit F1 on stuff? I haven't in forever.
Yeah.
Does it still work? I don't think it works.
Yeah, it's popping up and.
But I am maybe kind of old-ish, sort of. No, ish. So like back in the day, these docs have samples like directly in line here.
Right.
So I think we recognize that there are a bunch of APIs that basically have, and I think they have scores for the kinds of dots and the level of details. These dots are pretty like light. So I want to re-enable people to copy and paste to Glory and just like grab samples from here. So I think we're gonna do 2 things: cross-link these dots back into the actual conceptual docs, and then also add more content like in here because
this is the kind of doc where it's like it's a step above IntelliSense, but it really doesn't tell you anything, right? It's like
exactly.
Sent isn't it? You know, it's like great. Thanks,
yeah, exactly.
you know?
The pattern is the route pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are mostly that, and like even our middleware, it should show up better. Like I think we have like pretty crappy docs. So I think we went over our template.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's absolutely perfect. And we're basically going to run through and find all of the places that are kind of like highest priority.
Yep.
And make the docs not suck.
Yeah, I mean, the docs have gotten so much better over the past 5-10 years. Yeah. But docs are really hard too, because you've got changing framework, you've got changing samples, you've got changing best practices, you've got, you know, and maintaining docs and samples and tutorials is hard work because all the screenshots and the videos and the.
And we've gotten feedback that our docs are really good, but they cater to a specific audience. There's kind of like tutorials and there's deep dives. Yeah. There isn't the get me on my way to coding quickly without having to like learn an hour of content first.
I had to watch a long video or go through a
I had a team tell me that they were going to read the doc for configuration, and they saw it was an hour, and they were like, "Nope."
You got time for that?
It's detailed and it has all the things, but he wanted like the Cliff Notes version of that.
Yeah, give me the bullet points, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, well, that is a ton of stuff. We probably should wrap up. We did have questions on, so you've showed these demos, and these are like, you were frantically coding some of this up as we were like setting up, like, but they did ask, are you going to be publishing these samples somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll put on GitHub without the private keys, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so I will add them to the links that that are shared in the description, and then they can also follow you. I've updated your thing. It's David Fowler on Twitter. So we'll publish that out. Anything else you want to wrap up with here?
Thank you. And if you want me to come back, let me know, and I will come back and show other stuff.
Yeah, so definitely, in the chat and comments, let us know. These are totally fun, and we've had 300 people watching this whole time. So you've been keeping up with some of our best shows that we've had lately. So
wow,
hooray! Yeah, your check's in the mail.
Awesome.
you're a YouTuber now. You're a big star. Awesome. Cool. Well, all right. So we do not anymore have the. We no longer have the dramatic zoom out. We do instead just have music that plays, but I do need to set up a dramatic zoom out at some point in the future.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, thanks.
Thanks.
This is awesome. Okay. Bye.